I'm Anthony Alder from Alder IP, and welcome to another episode in the IP series. Today we're going to be talking loosely about pharmaceutical patents and some of the aspects of what you need to get a pharmaceutical patent. Now, pharmaceutical patents come in several different sort of flavors, if you will. A lot of these patents are tailored at different aspects of different kinds of pharmaceuticals. The first one that is worth considering is pharmaceuticals that are based on a microbiological component, so bacteria or an organism, where that's the active ingredient. These are usually in vaccines or probiotics. Often the actual organism that's put into the vaccine or the treatment is fairly unique. It's been genetically modified or isolated from some rare and unusual substance or location, and the person who's identified it, or the pharmaceutical company that's identified it, would want to protect that quite naturally. So what we have to do there is we have to take a sample of the actual microbiological component and deposit it under what's called the Budapest Treaty, which is a government lab where they actually receive the samples and store the samples. This provides, with patents, that you have full disclosure of what the actual microbiological organism is. And you don't actually have to submit a full genetic code and a full genetic and characterization markup with that organism. So the Budapest Treaty cuts off a whole lot of these problems. The other sorts of patents that you often have with pharmaceuticals is straight chemical patents, where we claim just the chemical component and the chemical structure. A third type is dosing. Dosing is where you've got a known chemical and you're using it in an unusual dosaging regime. A good example is like aspirin, where aspirin was usually used as a painkiller to start off with, but then they noticed that aspirin had a side effect, and the side effect was that it actually thins your blood and stops your blood from clotting. So quite often they'll give low dose aspirin as a treatment for heart conditions and that sort of thing. So dosaging in that kind of requirement would allow you to get a patent for aspirin, which was already known, but in a much lower dosaging regime than what was previously talked about, because that's what was efficacious in this particular example. The problem with dosaging regimes is now in Australia, they've clamped down on a lot of dosaging and a lot of kit type chemical patents, because they say that basically it's not inventive. But that's not the case overseas, particularly in the US, and you can definitely get dosaging patents in the US. You can also get synergistic recipe ones where you're taking two chemicals and put them together. Asthma treatments such as salbutamol and combinations with steroids, they're putting those together and making new drugs that are the combinations of those, or analgesic or something, which is ibuprofen and paracetamol mixed together. And when you have those mixed together, they actually have a benefit, which is synergistic, which actually means that it's better than each in singularity. The last point that we can make about pharmaceutical patents is that quite often we might not want to protect the actual pharmaceutical itself, because that might be known, but we might have come up with a new way of manufacturing it. So we go for a manufacturing type style claim, where it talks about the steps of how to make the actual pharmaceutical. This leads us on to, yes, pharmaceuticals are very patentable, and there is many ways to go about getting a pharmaceutical patent. You really have to consider all the options when you're looking at a pharmaceutical patent, because they're very complicated things, and we do have a team of people that are ready to help out with pharmaceutical patents. If you have any other queries about pharmaceutical patents, please feel free to contact myself or my team at Alder IP, and we're more than happy to walk you through some of the issues. Thanks for listening.